Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. Look at this headline from Bitcoinist. Trump duped into endorsing XRP for crypto reserve. Here's how. And this is a story that all sorts of toxic Bitcoin maximalists and people suffering from the affliction known as XRP derangement syndrome have been sharing very feverishly on social media. But to what degree is this true? Well, the story's real. This is an actual story. But there's a lot of speculation as to why Donald Trump didn't end up including XRP in a crypto reserve. There was a separate stockpile that was it ended up being touted, and even then we haven't seen a whole lot of fleshing out of that since then. So what gives? What actually happened here? Well, I'm going to share with you the story that broke on this, and I'm not convinced with the narrative that the toxic Bitcoin maximalists are running with. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so I'm sure that you all remember the post that's on your screen right here. This is from President Donald J. Trump on his social media platform, Truth Social. What's on your screen here was shared on March 2nd this year in the morning. And it reads as follows. Very famous post at this point. He wrote, "A U.S. crypto reserve will elevate this critical industry after years of corrupt attacks by the Biden administration, which is why my executive order on digital assets directed the Presidential Working Group to move forward on a crypto strategic reserve that includes XRP, Solana, and Cardano. I will make sure the U.S. is the crypto capital of the world. We are making America great again." And so I have to tell you, seeing that, even though that I knew he had connections with Brad Garlinghouse, so on and so forth, it was still surreal seeing the sitting president of the United States posting on social media about XRP. Unfathomable just a year prior. Just completely unfathomable. It would have been unfathomable during his first term too, because he was anti-crypto in the first term, but now he is very pro-crypto. Love to see it. I'm glad he did a 180 on that. It was the right thing. He figured that out. And but still, XRP was to be part of a U.S. crypto reserve, but then it didn't happen, right? So we got this headline on March 11th, just 9 days later. Womp womp. Why did Trump's strategic crypto reserve not include XRP? The cryptocurrency community was hit with a stunning twist when an executive order signed by President Donald Trump dashed the hopes of Ripple and its supporters. After pouring millions into political contributions to push for XRP's inclusion in a U.S. sovereign crypto reserve, the company and its co-founders watched their efforts unravel. Over the weekend, David Sachs, dubbed the Crypto Czar, shared the signed document on XRP, revealing that XRP would not be part of any strategic reserve as Trump had once vowed. Okay, so I'll pause to note, that's not the only reason that Ripple donated to Trump's inauguration and so on and so forth. Part of it is just to make sure that the legal clarity aspect was going to be what it was going to be. And so, yeah, and now it is true, like Brad Garlinghouse even publicly stated this, there had been discussions about XRP being perhaps part of some sort of United States reserve. And so when that news broke and he shared that post, I wasn't surprised here. And we'll get to what I think actually happened, but I'm doing things in order. I got to make sure everybody knows all these pieces and refresh you a little bit, or else it's not going to make as much sense when I get to the brand new piece of this. But yeah, there is a legit story as to Trump feeling like he was being tricked. Like that story is true though. But anyway, let me read a little bit further and we'll jump into it. There we go. Back on March 2nd, Trump had fueled excitement by pledging to establish a crypto strategic reserve featuring XRP, sparking a 36% price surge for the token within an hour. Okay, that's true, and the XRP peaked around what? Like $2.80, $2.90. It was something like that. Very short-lived, but for understandable reasons, it jumped because the president was he was posting about XRP as a U.S. part of a U.S. crypto reserve. And of course, and by the way, I remember this too, it's not mentioned in the story, but after that, there was outrage from Bitcoin maximalists, absolute outrage. And then he said, of course, Bitcoin, I'm paraphrasing, this is coming from memory, but he said something like, and of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum would be included too. And so the fact that that Bitcoin wasn't mentioned in this first post is actually perhaps part of the downfall, but let me circle back to that thought. He says, yet the reality unveiled in the executive order was starkly different. Far from elevating XRP to a prized reserve asset, Trump designated it to as a stockpile asset, meaning the government can only hold or sell it, no purchases allowed. The document explicitly states the United States government shall not acquire additional stockpile assets other than in connection with criminal or civil asset forfeiture proceedings, or in satisfaction of any civil money penalty imposed by any agency without further executive or legislative action. End quote. So that's a bit different than what we were hoping for based on that initial post on March 2nd, right? Certainly a bit different here. So what actually happened here? Well, once that news had broken, I already speculated. I was like, look, the Bitcoin maxis went freaking crazy. And as a result of the Bitcoin maxis going crazy, that because you know their deal. They're maximalists. They want Bitcoin only. They don't want any other coins to exist. They are toxic individuals. They are just the worst aspect of crypto participants. Like, this is the worst part of being in crypto, is having to tolerate these people, right? And so, of course, we saw what happened. Yeah, strategic crypto reserve, or strategic Bitcoin reserve, but not for anything else. In fact, we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with the stockpile. And so then we get this headline: Trump tricked into pushing XRP for crypto reserve. Okay. So what happened here? And there's truth to this, so check this out. U.S. President Donald Trump was reportedly manipulated by a lobbyist tied to Ripple Labs into announcing the XRP token would be part of his plans for a national cryptocurrency reserve. According to a May 8th Political report, an employee of pro-Trump lobbyist Brian Ballard gave the president the text to a social media post she recommended he write, announcing a U.S. strategic crypto reserve that would include XRP, Solana, and Cardano. Okay, so let's pause here to note, Trump already he's known what XRP is for a long time. He knows that Ripple is the biggest, will be the biggest entity on the planet to benefit if XRP does well. He knows that. So that's not a surprise, just to be clear here. So when he got this text and he ended up posting it, he knew what he was doing. He knew, and he was probably happy. I mean, it's like, frankly, he's got a good relationship with Brad Garlinghouse by all accounts, right? So he was happy to share that XRP, Solana, and Cardano, right? So let me go a little bit further here. Piece continues. After he posted the message to his social media platform on March 2nd, Trump learned Ripple was one of Ballard's clients, infuriating the president, who felt like he'd been used, Politico reported, citing two people familiar with the incident. Okay, so I'll pause here to note. The problem isn't that XRP was included, like he didn't know what it was. What to do, an XRP thing? Yeah, let's post it to the world. That's not what happened. He knew about XRP. He understands what Ripple the company is also. The problem here is not XRP. The problem is that he felt deceived because he was persuaded to share that post, which he agreed with. By the way, he agreed with it. He genuinely. There's no evidence that he didn't genuinely believe it, because otherwise he wouldn't have posted it. Duh. Of course he believed it. The problem here is that there was a lobbyist that had an ulterior motive, and he wasn't made aware of that. And so he felt that that was deceptive, and so he has a problem with that person then. That's what it is. It's not like he's banishing XRP into the woods. That's not what's happening here. But that's the way that the Bitcoin maxis are painting it. That's just not true. That doesn't make sense. There's no evidence for that. It doesn't even track. What actually happened, I believe, is that he was persuaded, unfortunately, after that March 2nd post, to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. He was persuaded that it should just be Bitcoin, and then put the rest of the stuff, including XRP, in a different category. That's separate from him not being happy with this particular lobbyist. These are two different things, but they want to lump it in as though it's the same thing, because they love just crapping all over XRP because they suffer from the affliction known as XRP derangement syndrome. That's what happened. Piece continues. After he posted the message to his social media platform on March 2nd, Trump learned Ripple was one of Ballard's clients, infuriating the president, who'd felt like he'd been used, Politico reported, citing two people familiar with the incident. He is not welcome in anything anymore, said Trump, referencing Ballard, according to the report. Trump had connections to Ripple long before the announcement of XRP in the proposed crypto reserve. The blockchain firm's chief legal officer, Stuart Alderody, donated more than $300,000 to fundraising and political action committees supporting Trump in the 2024 election. And both he and CEO Brad Garlinghouse met with the then president-elect in January and attended inauguration events. Yes, that's certainly true. In fact, that $300,000 figure, that was actually donated in XRP. And then it became worth more after that, obviously, but it was probably sold before that. Either way, though, I'm just saying he actually donated the XRP. That's my recollection anyway. You can fact check me on that. I think that's true. If I'm mistaken, then I apologize, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. I'm just pulling from like last summer memory. But anyway, that's what happened. So I just wanted to straighten this out here. Yes, there is truth to this. Yes, Trump, by all accounts, very upset about this. But that doesn't mean that that's not why XRP was taking a back seat here. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. In fact, he may not have even found out about that until after that decision was made. So, like, just stop it, toxic Bitcoin maximalists. I hope that, altcoins end up getting some more love here. But either way, just having even just something approximating a level playing field is fantastic for XRP. XRP thrives on an even playing field because it just freaking works. And it's the best cryptocurrency on the planet for payments, broadly speaking. It literally just works. It does what Bitcoin technologically cannot. It can function as a peer-to-peer cash system, which is what Satoshi Nakamoto originally envisioned Bitcoin doing, but Bitcoin cannot do that. It's too slow and it's too costly. So there's always a spot for a coin like XRP, and it was one of the first movers, so it ended up getting adopted for that. You'll love to see it if you're an XRP holder. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say, all right? That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.